You're now listening to Surviving Multiples with your host, Jordan Pettigrew. Hey guys, thanks again for joining in to episode 2. I'm so excited to have you here with me. And I just want to say that I'm so looking forward to today's episode as I kind of continue off with where I stopped last episode 1, kind of giving the background story of us finding out about the triplets. So I'm sorry I left you on a cliffhanger, but today we're going to kind of finish that up and talk more about that. You will share this with your friends and your family. That's the best way to help us out and kind of reach, a broader audience. Because that's my hope, is that this will reach and be helpful to everyone. And even if you're just interested in our story, I had a lot of people who, when I did the blog, say, you were writing all those, blog posts and you just, kind of left us hanging. And it was like, I know, I'm sorry, I got busy. But I really do feel like at this point that, I'm at a place where this is something I'm excited about, I'm passionate about, and I need a hobby for me as well. And so kind of sharing our story and, talking about mom things is a great way for me to do that. So, picking back up with the last episode, I talked about how, I had a kind of an inkling or a suspicion that I might be having multiples, maybe twins, definitely was not thinking triplets. And so, like I said, this was during the year 2020 was when I found out, September 2020. And so I was wanting to wait, like I said, because I didn't want to go have that ultrasound and, go through the whole thing again of like them being like, we see something, but you're not really far enough along to hear the heartbeat. So I was like, let's wait. Well, fast forward, I told you I found out that, in September, I had fall break in October at school. And so I had called my doctor's office and I'm like, hey, listen, I know this is, my really second, full pregnancy, but third, actually time being pregnant, and I'm showing a lot faster. Is there any way I could just go ahead and come in? Because I didn't want to raise suspicion of me being like, hey, I got to leave work to go to the doctor. I really just wanted to, try and go on fall break. And I felt like I was far enough along that hopefully, prayerfully, we should see something. So due to all the COVID restrictions, I was really scared that Clay would not be able to attend my ultrasound. But thankfully, my doctor's office was wonderful. They allowed him and even Maddox to come because, like I said, it was fall break, so his preschool was not open. And so they were going to let him come in for the ultrasound as well. So we get called back, and I remember my heart just felt like it was going to beat outside of my chest. And I go to lay down on the, ultrasound table, and the ultrasound tech said she would try to see the baby, by doing the ultrasound on my stomach. So normally if your bladder is full enough, they can do this, really early on. And as soon as we get into the room, Maddox knows where we're at because, like I said, I'd had that previous pregnancy that was, a loss, and he would go with us. And so he associated that room with like, hey, we're going to go see, hopefully a baby in mommy's belly. And so he even said to us when we got in there, he's like, oh my goodness, do you have a baby in your belly? Because I hadn't said anything to him yet because I didn't want to say something and, set him up for, heartbreak again. And so I was like, I don't know. We're going to just that's all we're here. We're going to see, and he always called it the dark room. We're going into the dark room. And so he kind of got excited, but so she tries to do it on my stomach, and I kind of thought I saw something, when the image flashed up on the screen, but I was like, I don't know. I'm not an ultrasound tech. So she says to me, she's like, you know what? She's like, I can't really see as well as I want to. So I'm going to have you go to the restroom, come back, we're going to perform it vaginally, whatever. So this made me really worried because I'm like, oh my goodness, what if we get in there and they can't see anything again? What if the baby is not developing like they said, or there's no heartbeat? My mind's just going worry. So finally, I make it back into the room, what seems like forever, and very quickly, she finds the baby, she finds the heartbeat, and I remember I'm just crying tears of joy at this point. I'm so happy. We saw the baby. At the time, we think it's the only baby, the first baby, and heard its strong heartbeat of 161. So she told me we'd have, a few more routine things to check out and that it wouldn't be too much longer. So she's doing the scan and, we're making small talk. I tell her a little bit about our story. And I remember all of a sudden she just gets really quiet. And I'm like, okay, like, why is she not speaking? Did I say something wrong? Then my mind goes to, oh no, like maybe she's found something wrong, and she doesn't want to say anything. So again, my heart just kind of like sinks. I'm like, oh gosh. So after a few seconds, she says, I have something to tell you. And we're like, okay. And she's like, you're not just having one baby. And I remember like, I am just like overjoyed and I scream out, we're having twins? And she said, nope, you are having triplets. And apparently my reaction was so loud that people could hear me outside of the ultrasound room. And I remember like just being overjoyed, and I look over at Clay and he is sitting there super quiet. And the next thing I know is I hear him take out a can of dip tobacco, and he opens it up. And I'm like, are you okay? Like, he goes, I think I'm going to be sick. And so Maddox is like, three babies? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, well, we only prayed for one. And I'm like, well, I prayed for one, you prayed for one, and Daddy prayed for one. So the ultrasound tech proceeds to show us the rest of the babies and their heartbeats. And all of the babies, had similar heartbeats. They were measuring right where they should be, which was a huge blessing after, all the heartache we had gone through previously. And each baby had their own sac. So, they were, we didn't know at this point if they would have their own placentas, but they had their own sac. And so we wouldn't find that out for a few weeks. But this was an ideal situation that the babies were not, having to share things. Like we did end up finding out later on, they would all each have their own placenta. So they weren't going to have to share nutrients, which hopefully, when that kind of situation happens, that means that they can go farther. So that's a huge blessing. So after the ultrasound, we're just in shock. So Clay and Maddox had to go to wait in the car at this point. And that was kind of difficult because here I am like so excited. I want to talk about this, but it's like Clay and I can't talk about this yet, And so I'm sitting there thinking, what's he doing? How's he responding? And so since Clay couldn't be in the room, I put him on speaker so that he could talk to the doctor and ask any questions he might have. And my wonderful doctor, Dr. Jack Rowland, if you know him, he is fabulous. He is hilarious. He's calm. He was exactly the doctor that I needed for this situation. He says to Clay, Clay, do you need directions to the closest liquor store? And we were just laughing so hard. So while I was waiting to see the doctor, I just couldn't contain the news. I was like, I have to tell somebody, our original plan was we were going to wait and not tell anybody about the pregnancy until I got way farther along. But when we found out triplets, that was all out the window. And my biggest regret is that I did not record the reactions of my family members telling them like we were having triplets. So if you are having multiples and you have not announced this yet, please record your family member's reaction because it was priceless. And while I will never forget their reactions, I wish that my children could see the reactions of their grandparents and family members finding out. So my mom that day was actually going to have a stress test done on her heart. She had been having, some heart palpitations, just some, kind of issues. My grandmother was not in good health. I'd been causing her a lot of stress. So she was just, going to get a stress test done. So I'm like, okay, I've got to call her. and not even thinking that she's on the way to the stress test appointment. I call her and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And she's like, well, Thomas and I are, on the way to my appointment. And I'm like, okay, well, so you're sitting down. I'm like, are you stopped somewhere? Are you driving right now? And she's like, no, we're, sitting at a red light. I'm like, okay, well, I have something to tell you. So, my doctor peeks around the corner, my nurse who, these are the people that I went to when I had Maddox. So I knew them very well. I'm like, okay, so they're like wanting to hear the news. And so I have her on speaker and I was like, Mom, I'm having triplets. And she was like, she didn't speak for a second. She was speechless. And that never happens with my mom. And my mom does not cuss. And she goes, you've got to be, shit. And I'm not going to say the word, but me. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. And she's like, what? Like, are you serious? Like, we thought maybe twins, but we never thought. And she's just like freaking out. And she's like, what? How? Like, and I'm like, listen, we're about to meet with the doctor. I'll find out more. And she's like, I guess this is perfect before I go to the stress test. And she said that she went into the stress test and the people were like, you're having a good day. And she's like, I just found out I'm having triplets. So this is a great time to do not I'm having triplets. My daughter is having triplets. So this is a great time for you to do the stress test. But no, it was hilarious. So anyways, I'm, meeting with my doctor and he's telling me, like all the different appointments I'll have and, lets me know that the average, gestation period for triplets is, 31 to 32 weeks. But that like pretty much a full-term triplet pregnancy is 35 weeks. So I would not be able to go back past that point just for, their safety, my safety. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, 35 weeks, that's my goal. So I also learned that, I'd have to have a C-section and, that was something that I was really nervous about because I have a scarring issue. And so I remember going to the dermatologist one time and them saying, like, if you ever have a C-section, you need to be very careful because you do have this issue of scarring where my scars like to raise up because it's due to too much collagen in my skin, which is, I guess, great for aging. I don't know if it's in my face, if it's with my face too, but that'd be great for aging. But anyways, it causes my scars to kind of puff up. So praise the Lord, I did not have that issue with my C-section scar, another miracle from God. But another thing was I found out that with triplets, I would get an ultrasound at every appointment. So that was really neat because I got to see the babies and their progression, and that was just so wonderful. So I had a lot of photos and getting to see them. So anyways, like I said, I get out to the car and, in the first appointment, my blood pressure was like sky high because I was just obviously, going through a huge range of emotions. So I get out to the car and, I'm talking to Clay and I'm like, okay, like, are we going to tell people? Like, I've already told my mom. He's like, I've already called my dad. I'm like, okay, I figured you did. Clay and his dad are super close. And I'm like, are we going to, go ahead and call everybody else? He's like, yeah. He's like, we need to. So, a lot of them were like in shock like us. But everybody was so excited. The funniest part was that Clay's brother and his wife and Clay's stepmom did not believe us at first. They're like, y'all are lying. We don't believe you. Because Clay's family loves to play pranks. And so they're like, we don't believe you. Like, we believe you're having a baby, but we don't believe you're having 3. Like, you're lying. And I'm like, no, we swear. So they were like, you need to send us a video of the ultrasound and we need to see your name in the picture so that we can know you've not edited it. And we're like, okay, like, so they were shocked, needless to say. And anyway, so that was kind of, us finding out. When we got home that day, Clay literally went outside and sat on his lawnmower and sat there. And then he mowed the yard, I think 3 times. Like, it was like he just kept going around and around in circles. And people were calling. They're like, how's Clay? And I'm like, yeah, I don't think it's really sunk in yet. And that was kind of the, I guess, like the theme of his life for the first few months was it did not sink in at first. Like, people would see him. And I remember Maddox, his preschool director, was like, yeah, I saw Clay at Costco, because that's where Clay was working at the time. Clay actually still works part-time at Costco, and that was a huge blessing for their insurance. But anyways, she'd be like, I saw Clay at Costco, and he still doesn't look like the news is sunken in. Like, he's still got that blank stare on his face when I talk about it. And so, for me, it didn't sink in until we started getting in 3 of everything, like the 3 car seats and, the 3 cribs and all that stuff. That's when I'm like, oh my goodness, we're having triplets. Like, I had comprehended that, but it was like seeing the 3 of everything was kind of when I kind of started going, we're having triplets. Like, oh my goodness, how are we going to do this? But I will say that God had just given me an overwhelming sense of peace, that he was, he had allowed this to happen. He had given us this blessing, and he was going to take care of us. So back to the getting 3 of everything delivered. I remember telling my mom, I'm like, our UPS and Postal Service are going to really think that like I'm crazy. I've accidentally ordered 3 of everything. And I remember like right before the triplets came, Clay went out one day, taped a piece of paper to our garbage can that said, I apologize. From here on out, we are going to have 3 of everything, like, 3 car seat boxes, we're having triplets pretty much is what he said. And there's going to be a mass amount of garbage that's going to increase. And so like, that was the kind of thing, like I remember telling the postal, service and the UPS guy, like, hey, yeah, we're not crazy. We didn't order 3 car seats by accident. Like we're having triplets. And people's face, like their reaction. I mean, seeing the reaction of our family was one thing, but seeing the reaction of just like, people who like we just come in contact with like at the grocery store, people you just meet, like your postal worker, it was hilarious because people would be like, you could really see when people were listening to you when they weren't, because I would see their reaction and then they would be like, wait, what, triplets? And it was like they had to do a double take. So that was really funny. So I mentioned how at this time, I was still teaching, and I actually taught my whole pregnancy. I say my whole pregnancy. Sorry, I taught up until about 21 weeks. My goal was to make it to 24, but like I said, that first appointment, my blood pressure was really high, and that was a theme through my whole pregnancy. I was super blessed that I was only hospitalized once for it, but it was high, and I ended up getting preeclampsia at the end. But I'm going to go more into that whole kind of like being pregnant, the like delivery and all that stuff in the 3rd episode. But anyways, I was teaching up until 21 weeks. So thankfully I had a wonderful co-teacher and parapro who, and just school in general, who took such good care of me and, really made my health and the baby's health a priority. And then Clay was at Costco, which was a huge blessing because, Costco, if you're not familiar kind of with what they provide for their employees, they are a wonderful place to work. They pay well. They have excellent insurance. And that was really kind of what originally kept Clay at Costco was the insurance. He had like I said, dreams of doing other things. And he had actually almost quit Costco to join the fire department right before we found out we were having the triplets. And we just kept praying about it, and we just couldn't get peace. And it was weird because I kept thinking, why are we not getting peace about this situation? Because I knew it was something Clay wanted to do. At the time, the loss in pay wasn't going to be that big of a deal because we were just a family of 3. And I knew he could kind of do like a side gig with the fire department, since he would have those, 48 hours off when he wasn't at the fire department. So I'm like, he can still do something on the side. So like financially it was time, but we just couldn't get peace. And thankfully Clay was very just selfless and decided to stay at Costco, because even though the fire department does have good insurance, Costco's insurance was just unparalleled, especially for having multiples, and them, having to stay in the NICU for a period of time, my high risk appointments, every time I walked into the high risk doctor, it was not just, okay, here's we got to pay for mom, we got to pay for the 3 babies, every time they did a scan, they're charging you for each baby on that scan. I remember getting the bill, or I didn't, obviously not my portion of the bill, but looking at what insurance's portion was for my anatomy scan, which is, a very detailed scan. It was something like $15,000 just for that scan. I mean, when I say these are like $1 million babies, like it's not a joke. Like just their NICU stay alone was $950,000. I think our portion that we actually ended up paying for my one hospital stay before I had them, my C-section, my stay, the triplets, was like a little over $3,000. So we were super blessed with wonderful insurance, and I'm so appreciative to Costco for that. So anyways, like I said, Clay was working there. Thankfully, he had not left yet because that insurance was, vital. And so he was doing that, and that also was a huge blessing because I don't know if I could have made it through my pregnancy without Clay there every night. Like I said, right now he is a firefighter. So he ended up, when I decided that, we decided really for our family that me teaching was just not going to work with the challenging demands that, raising triplets, especially triplets who are babies and young. I just knew teaching was not realistic at the time, because I do not want to do something if I cannot give it my all and my whole attention. And I knew that I was not doing anything great. I wasn't a great teacher at the time. I wasn't really being a great wife. I wasn't being the best mom I could be. And so I was like, something's got to give here. And so Clay was like, listen, he's like, I want to make it so you can stay home and you don't miss out on these moments. And that's what's going to be best for our family. And so we really took a leap of faith, and Clay decided that he was going to go to the fire department full time, and then he would work at Costco part time. And so the blessing of this is that it allowed him, as long as you work part-time at Costco, a certain amount of hours, he was able to work with his store, and they were able to, provide him, he's able to get insurance still through Costco. And then he works there, part-time when he's not at the fire department. So he does work a lot. He is truly kind of burning the candle at both ends, but it allows me to be able to stay home, raise our children, and I really enjoy that. And I'm so thankful for him working hard and, sacrificing. But the blessing is that he gets to work at the fire department, which is, like I said, is something he's wanted to do. And so he loves that job, and he's truly enjoying what he's doing. So a little bit about, my pregnancy with the triplets. I was super blessed to make it to 33 weeks and 6 days. So I pretty much say 34 weeks because it just makes it easier. But that was a huge blessing because, like I said earlier, kind of the average range that most people make, it's 31 to 32 weeks. So I was miserable at the end. I mean, I was literally going to the doctor, I think 3-4 times a week, between high risk and, just my regular OB. And I remember going in, and there was one day I had this sweet nurse that I would see at the high risk doctor, and she one day, like kind of near the beginning of my pregnancy, was talking about how there was another, mom expecting triplets, because anytime you're having multiples, and if you're having multiples, this will be something that you have to do, but you have to go to a high risk doctor as well as your regular OB. So the high-risk doctor sees lots of different people for lots of different various reasons, but again, they have to see multiples. And so there was another, triplet mom who was there, and the nurse was telling me that she had been in there just like crying, and she actually had gotten sent to go have her babies that day. And I was like sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like crying, like, gosh, like, is she that miserable? Like, not realizing that would be me in a few months. And so, like I said, I remember going into the doctor and being like, could I please have the babies today? Please. It's just one more. It's just a little bit earlier, because they kept telling me, like, we've got this date set, like, of, 35. And then it kind of got pushed up to 34 weeks, and I started getting preeclamptic. And I'm like, please just let me go today. It's only like 4 days early. And my doctor would be like, Jordan, do you want them to spend more time in the NICU? Like, one day in is like 1 day less than the NICU. And I was like, okay. And I'm so thankful that, he would tell me that, and that God just allowed me to go farther, because seeing them in the NICU for any time at all is just heartbreaking. And so it really was, we were able to see when they did get to the NICU how much, like, 1 day, in the womb really can help them. Like, it's amazing the impact of days. Really, I mean, especially weeks, but even days make a difference. And in our next episode 3, I'm going to go into the delivery and their NICU time. That way, that can kind of hopefully help some moms who are on this journey. And that is something too, like, we were really, like I said, God's been planting the seeds of this podcast and kind of some information, because I got to meet so many other multiple moms in the NICU, and I've talked to a lot of other moms who have multiples, and like kind of learning the different experiences of parents in the NICU. That's kind of its own just kind of thing, as well as like ways that I can hopefully kind of help you or provide you with resources, or point you in the direction of people who have some resources for you as a mom of multiples in the NICU, or even just a mom in the NICU. Like, Maddox was in the NICU, so I've experienced that with him. My triplets were in the NICU. I never got to have that experience of having a baby room in with me at the hospital. And I will say that's something that was kind of hard for me for a while, because I remember sitting there, especially with Maddox, in the room and hearing like the other rooms, like the moms with their babies, and my baby's not with me. You know, you've had this baby with you for 9 months and then they're kind of ripped away from you. And it's like, that was hard, man, you know? So anyways, back to the pregnancy. And first off, I didn't introduce my triplets' names. So let me do that for those of you who don't know us personally. I'm hoping that this podcast is going to make it to some people that I don't know yet. And so I can kind of introduce their names. So again, my first, I'll go with like how they were in the womb, baby A. So baby A is Madeline Grace. And so Madeline is a family name, and my middle name is Grace. So, sorry, I just said my middle name is Grace. This is a mom brain for you. Madeline is a family name, and it's my middle name. Grace is Madeline's middle name. So these two names have had, big importance in our family. Madeline was also my grandmother's name, so my maternal grandmother. And it's amazing how names have such power, because Madeline is my grandmother through and through. If I was someone who believed in reincarnation, I would be like, that is my grandmother right there. Like, I'm literally raising my grandmother, which is so fitting, because aside from my mom, like, my grandmother was like secondary in raising me. And so my whole life I pictured that Madeline would have like this dark hair, because Clay and I both have dark hair. My dad has got very dark hair, darker complexion. And so I really was like, Madeline is going to just be dark-headed, blue-eyed, and she did have dark hair when she was born, but now it is like strawberry blonde. It is so funny. So she is very fair-skinned, very petite, very, like I said, strawberry blonde hair, blue eyes. She is my grandmother just made over. And I wish my grandmother was here to really get to see her. She got to meet her before she passed, but she would have loved Madeline. Grace, like I said, is her middle name. And that was the church that my parents were actually married at, where my great-grandfather served as a pastor, was Grace Episcopal Church in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And so that's where Madeline got her name. And we were really big on, we wanted all of the children to have names that had meaning. Baby B is Brooks. And so Brooks, we just always liked that name. And I've thought that the name, like the little nickname Brooksy, was so cute. And Maddox has started calling him Brooksy Boy. And it's precious. I mean, it's so cute. Brooks has a peanut allergy. And so if you have allergies in your family, or you know what that's like, that's scary. And that's something kind of as a whole family we've had to adopt and adjust to, is like, Brooks' peanut allergy. And so Maddox, the other day, got in the car and he's like, I got this at school, and he hands it to me, and it's like a Reese's egg. And I was like, I'm like, thank you for giving this to me, buddy. I'm like, you could have had it as long as you like washed your hands when you got done, then just obviously didn't kiss Brooks when you got home. And he's like, no, he's like, I told my teacher I cannot have that. And she said, why? And I said, because my Brooksy boy is allergic to peanuts. And I was like, that is one of the cutest things I've ever seen. But even Maddox takes it so seriously. But anyways, so the name Brooks is very hard to find a middle name to go with. Like, we thought about Brooks Oliver. We thought about lots of different names, but nothing just flowed like we wanted. And Oliver didn't really have a meaning. Brooks, we both loved it, but it wasn't like a family name. And I'm like, well, I want a family name. So the name Samuel is a family name on my mom's side. And I loved the story of Samuel in the Bible. So I thought that was such a fitting name to go with our story. So Brooks is actually Samuel Brooks. And I love his name. The only drawback is it's really hard having your child go by a different name than their first name. So since Brooks is technically his middle name, that sometimes is a challenge when we go to doctor's appointments. And they're like, Samuel Pettigrew. And I'm like looking around like, who is that? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's Brooks. And then baby C was Carson Lee. And so, like Brooks's name, we really like the name Carson. It was funny because we had always said that if we had a girl, we would name her Madeline. And we had always said if we had a boy, we'd name him Maddox. So those names were, taken. Maddox was just one that Clay had loved. And Maddox is Maddox Clay. for Clay and his family and his dad. But so we kind of already decided Madeline, we decided Brooks, and I liked that baby B would be Brooks and that baby C, I wanted that to be a C name. So Clay was like, hey, what about the name Carson? And I'm like, I like that. Like, that's a good name. And so I remember telling my mom that name, and she was like, I can't stand that name. And Clay was like so hurt. It was like, he was like, what? I'm like, Clay, it doesn't matter. Like, these are our names, like, whatever we like. And of course she ended up coming to love it. But it's so funny how, like I said, even with like Madeline's name, that names have, meaning. And we really, I think in the Bible somewhere it says something about like, the names have meaning. And in the Bible, it's very clear that God puts emphasis on names, even just like with what we call him, because in the Bible, it will list, all the names of like the sons and the daughters of different people. And so Carson has a love for cars like I have never seen before. And so there's even a show, and I think it's on Amazon, called Corey Carson or something. And it might be it's either on Amazon Prime or Netflix. But anyways, that show reminds me of Carson, because Carson loves cars. He plays with cars all the time. And I was telling Clay the other day, I said, I'm so thankful that we named Carson and like didn't switch and like have Brooks be Carson and, vice versa, because I would have always thought I gave them the wrong name. So we almost had the A for, we almost did Adeline instead of Madeline so that it would be an A, but I really wanted that family name. So anyways, the Lee part of Carson's name is for Clay's grandmother. She was Georgia Lee. And then I also had a great-grandfather named Lee. And then there's even more connections like that we ended up finding out with like that. And then we ended up finding out more with like Brooks's name. So anyways, long story short, lots of family connections. So I love that. Some people were like, well, why didn't you do like 3 C names or 3 M names? And they already have to share so much. I wanted their names to be something that were unique to them and important, and that they had individuality about. And so I didn't want them having to share like the sounds of their names as well. So, getting back to about my pregnancy, I was very blessed that, the pregnancy was pretty, routine for a triplet pregnancy. I did, like I said, have, scans, very regularly. Every time I would go to the doctor, I had more frequent appointments. I had to go to the high risk doctor. I went there for the first time at a little past 12 weeks. They wanted me to get kind of like out of that, miscarriage first trimester kind of period before I came in. And I remember that was kind of like, I felt like a huge time when I could kind of take a sigh of relief. But then when I got to the high risk, they really didn't want me to sit there and just be like, okay, 34 weeks is your goal, or 35, whatever. It was more like, okay, let's get to 18 weeks. Let's get to 24 weeks. Like, let's just take it in chunks. And that really was helpful. Once I did get to the 24 weeks, like that kind of viable stage, even though it's still very, dangerous, I did feel a little bit of a sigh of relief. But so I went and had my anatomy scan done at my 21-week appointment. And at this point, the babies were each weighing about 13 ounces, a little bit under a pound. Carson was at 14 ounces. So they were on the smaller side, but my doctor, wasn't concerned. I just started praying like that they would grow a lot. And one thing that I really attribute to them kind of packing on the extra weight and being good size, triplets when they were born, was drinking protein shakes, because I got to a point where I was hungry, like I said, way hungrier than just a normal pregnancy, but I couldn't really fit food. There was like no room for food because, all my organs were squished and I was so full. So, I started drinking those protein shakes, and they really started getting bigger on the scans. So that was like, if you're pregnant or know somebody who's pregnant and your baby is smaller, I really suggest trying protein shakes. I would get like those ones from Costco that they have that are already pre-made, and I would drink those, and that was super helpful. So anyways, the whole time just kind of praying that we could make it to that 34, 35 week thing, but had our anatomy scan at 21 weeks. And I remember being so excited about this and like getting to see them. And like they told me, they were like, listen, they were like, this takes a long time. The anatomy scan does. It takes a long time for one baby, but times 3. They were like, if you need a break, during it, we can stop. And I remember looking at the ultrasound tech and I'm like, listen, if you need a break, like your arm is probably going to be exhausted trying to scan these babies. And so we were very fortunate that they all cooperated and we were all able to see, everything on them, because sometimes you have to go back multiple times just to try and see everything because of the way they're positioned, the way they're moving. So anyways, at that appointment, Clay was not able to go. And so he was able to go to my first high-risk appointment, but due to high COVID cases, he was not going to be able to go to that appointment. And so that was, a little hard, but I was like, okay, I'll just take really good notes and tell him. So at that appointment, we got some kind of concerning news about Brooks, and he had what is called a CPC on his brain. And a lot of this medical terminology, I apologize if I pronounce it wrong. But what it was a very small kind of marker that was kind of concerning because it can be a marker for what's called trisomy 18. And the other name for that is Edwards syndrome. And pretty much what this syndrome does is it affects like fetal growth and development, and it can cause life-threatening medical conditions for children. Sometimes the babies who have this die before birth, or maybe even within the first month. Like if you look it up online, it says that 5 to 10% of children with this can live past their first year, but if they do live, they often have developmental delays, severe intellectual disabilities. This was just something that was very concerning. It's like, we're having multiples, that's going to be challenging. Then we're looking at like, is this baby going to make it? Are they going to have life-threatening problems that may like cause them to have issues their whole life? So could we potentially have children, like a child with disabilities? This is a lot to think about taking care of. But I will say, like, I was so blessed with doctors who never once tried to talk me into selective, like reduction or anything. That just, for our beliefs, was not something that we were going to do. Like, we had felt very strongly that if God gave us these babies, he was going to, provide and take care of them and allow my body to carry them. And so thankfully that was never suggested to us. I do have, people I know who that was suggested, and you have to pray and be, confident in your decision. But that was just, like I said, not an option that we were going to explore at all. So the doctors, actually, even though he did have this marker, my doctor, Dr. Hawk, she was wonderful. She did not seem like overly concerned, which was really a blessing, because without Clay there, like, I was processing the information, but I also had been given just so much information from the anatomy scan in general. And she's like, listen, she's like, I don't want you to go home and look this up. She's like, we don't see the other markers that he typically would have if he had it, like smaller head. There would be some signs in his kidneys. And she's like, we don't see any of those. So she's like, we're just going to pray that like this is just a marker, because you can have markers for lots of things but not have them, and that, it will go away. So I'm like, okay. So I know when I called Clay, I made things sound so much worse, because he's like, just at this point, he's like, what? He's like, I don't know what to do. Like, and I'm like, well, don't look it up, but this is what it is. So of course he goes to look it up. And I mean, we're having to wait like 2 weeks until we have another scan. So that 2-week period, we are just like, just coveting people's prayers. And we're just like, please, Lord. So at my next appointment, I had to go to my OB. And so I go in and I'm telling her about it. And I'm like, can you just look and see, like, if you see this, like, trying to explain it to her. And she's like, Jordan, she's like, I don't see anything. She's like, I don't see that at all. She's like, I'm looking exactly. She's like, she even goes in and like pulls up, because the high risk would send them the ultrasound pictures. She goes in, pulls it up. She's like, no, listen, like, I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you for sure that it's gone. She's like, but I'm just telling you that like, I don't see it. And so we're like, this is amazing. So I go to my next appointment at high risk, and sure enough, they come in and they're like, it's gone. Like he doesn't have it then. And so that was a huge, huge miracle. So just throughout the whole time, I just kept, trying to stay positive, keep a positive mindset. And I'm someone who has struggled with anxiety. I had extreme anxiety over the pandemic. I had anxiety about like trying to work. At one point it kind of got overwhelming to me, thinking about like, okay, I've got to set my babies up for a healthy start. But I will say that again, like God just gave me that peace, and I had to, rest in the fact that He was going to put a hedge of protection around them in a way that, I couldn't. So I remember seeing an amazing post on Facebook while I was pregnant. And I know sometimes that can be a rarity. Like, we often talk about social media and how sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. But this was something really positive. And the premise of the photo was that God often has something better in store for us than we can even imagine if we'll just release our hold and control over things. And so the post showed a photo of a little girl holding a teddy bear in front of her. And she's like clutching onto it. And Jesus is standing there in front of her. He's kind of got his arms out, like asking for her to give him the bear. And behind him, he has a huge giant teddy bear that he's wanting to give the girl if she would just give up that little tiny bear she's holding on to. And this reminded me so much of my situation. And I'm just so thankful that God had bigger and better things and plans imagined for us that I couldn't even see. And, I had to kind of wait for those and just have faith and be patient. And I have to remind myself of this sometimes even now, like I've seen the miracles God's done in our lives, and I've seen the things He's done, but sometimes I still don't want to give Him control, and it's hard. And, so if that's something you're struggling with as a mom, like worrying about your children, my triplets are sick right now and I worry about them, and it's like, God's taking care of us. I've just got to remember He's going to take care of us, So anyways, that was kind of, up until the 21 week. So then, like I said, around that time was when I realized, okay, I'm going to have to stop working. I had an episode where I had gone to work one day. My blood pressure was high and I could feel it. Like normally they would ask me at my appointment, like, has your blood pressure felt high? And I'd gotten to where I'd started taking it home because it was high at the appointments. They were doing like a urine test to check for preeclampsia, but I was not actually like showing any like signs of it yet besides like just high blood pressure. And like you can just have high blood pressure from white coat syndrome, which I was pretty convinced at that point I developed because it was not high any time at the doctor. But on this one instance, like I said, I'd gone to work. I could feel my blood pressure just rising. And so I took my blood pressure cuff with me to work. I take it and it's just like high and it's like not wanting to go down. So thankfully, my school was wonderful. They're like, go home. I call my doctor. I finally got it to lower. But at this point, I'm not taking blood pressure medicine or anything. So I'm just like trying to avoid that if we can. And I'm realizing that it's starting to take a toll on me. Not necessarily so much the working part, but it was the trying to get up in the morning, get Maddox out the door by myself because Clay had to be at work at 4 a.m. and then he would get off at 12:30. That was the schedule he worked, which was great for like the evenings, but it made morning time really challenging. So I was trying to get him to preschool, get myself to work. And I would always say like, once I get to work, like I'm okay. Cause like I've got so much help from my co-teachers and my parapro, and a lot of my work I could do sitting down, which was a blessing. But I was also trying to wear a mask while working because we were still under mask mandates. And so I couldn't breathe, and so I had to make the decision sooner than I had planned to stop working. And so it was very bittersweet as I loved my job, my coworkers and my students, but I knew that, working was really starting to affect me and how my pregnancy would progress. So my blood pressure was beginning to rise. My doctors agreed that to make it easier for me to make it as long as possible, I would need to begin my leave. And praise the Lord, I had set up, short-term disability, and Clay and I had kind of been saving for this point. So that was able to help kind of with that financial burden of not working and having to quit sooner than I had thought. But we were so blessed that right before I quit, my coworkers had thrown me a baby shower. And so that was just one thing that like, I do want to do an episode on things you need and like things to put on your registry, because that was a big like task of trying to figure all that out, and the things that I ended up realizing like, hey, yeah, we really needed this, or hey, we didn't need this, or hey, I should have registered for this, So anyways, I got very blessed that my coworkers, like I said, threw me a absolutely wonderful baby shower. And not only did they throw me a baby shower, but then I had my family throw me a baby shower, and then Maddox's preschool threw us a diaper and wipe drive. And that, let me tell you, was amazing. We did not end up buying diapers and wipes for our triplets until they were 15 months old because of the generosity of others. And that just took a huge burden off us because, I mean, you can imagine, like right now we go through a case of the big size diapers, like the 180 every 2 weeks. So, that adds up. So not having to worry about the stress of those diapers was amazing. Like we were just overwhelmed at the generosity and love that people had for us while I was pregnant. When I had the babies, the meal trains that people did for us and everything, like it was just such a huge blessing. So, I had my baby shower at school right before I left, and that wore me out. Like I needed to, recover from that. I was blessed that, I had my glucose screening, after I had, quit working, and moms of multiples are at more of a risk for gestational diabetes. And I was so thankful that I did not have to worry about that because that was something that I did worry about and something I feel like I might have developed at the end of Maddox's pregnancy because he was born with low blood sugar. That's why he had to go to the NICU. And that's normally characteristic of moms who did have gestational diabetes. But anyways, I was very blessed. I did not have that to worry about with the triplets. And that was, really, I feel like a miracle. So, like I said, I had all this generosity and the hospitality of others. And I had a devotional while, this was all going on, like kind of around the time of my showers and stuff. And it was on hospitality and spreading the love of Christ and how we treat others. And I just pray that I'm able to continue this hospitality that I was shown to others someday and help others because we were shown so much love. And the verse that was associated with this devotional was Romans 12:13, and it said, "Practice hospitality." Peter said, "Love each other deeply and offer hospitality." And I remember reading this devotional, and I thought about all the ways that people had blessed our family and shown us hospitality while I was pregnant and, when the triplets had come home. And we've had so many people willing to help us. It's been amazing. I could never, thank those people enough. So anyways, get to the month of April. And it was exciting because Maddox was born in April as well, but his due date was actually in May. But with the triplets, I actually got to know that April was baby month. Like I knew I was going to have the babies that month. And it was a monumental day because we had made it to, April, which was sometimes a lot further than I ever thought I would make. So I found out in April that I would not go any further than, 34 weeks because my blood pressure, like I said, was getting higher. And I didn't know like the exact date, but I just knew like, okay, it's going to be at 34 weeks. So the babies were all measuring, at the beginning of April, over 3 pounds. And our prayer was that they would make it, each of them, to 4 pounds by the time they were born. And I knew they were going to spend time in the NICU. Like that was not like a surprise to me. It's just I was hoping that they would not spend too much time. So when I get to the episode on like their birth and everything, I'll talk about their weights. And but one thing to know is that like the whole time, like kind of towards the end, they just kept saying to me like baby A, which was Madeline, is she was like very low. Her head was down near my bladder. So she was actually the only baby that was like, if I had been like not having to have a C-section, that was like in the right position. So she was head down. Brooks was breech, and then Carson was transverse, which is, kind of like laying long ways. And anyways, so Madeline was head down. She was very hard to get measurements on, but she looked a lot smaller than the boys. So they were kind of concerned that she may have like this reverse cord flow, like where she may not be getting the correct blood flow and nutrients that she needed. So they were kind of watching her, but my white coat syndrome was getting a lot worse, like I said. And so I was really, just trying to stay calm. And I remember going to an appointment, and I believe the exact day was April 8th, and I'll have to check the date on that. But anyways, I go to an appointment. We go in, and my blood pressure had always been high on the top, but the bottom number had kind of stayed low. Well, the bottom number was really high. And so I got to the room, and my typical doctor I saw was not there. It was at high risk. And I go in, and she's like, listen, she's like, your blood pressure is really high. She's like, we want you to go ahead and drive on over to Erlanger and be seen because we're concerned. And so at this point, you know, I'm 32 weeks pregnant and almost 33, but 32. And so I have to go to the hospital. And by the time I get to the hospital to be checked in, I'm so nervous. My blood pressure, they said, was at one point like 215 over 110. Like, it was insanely high. And I couldn't see the machine at this point, thankfully, because that probably would have made me freak out. But that was when they finally, at this point, decided to put me on blood pressure medicine. And they wanted to do a urine analysis. We had had one done before for checking for preeclampsia. And so we had kind of like a baseline. And so while I was in the hospital overnight, they were trying to decide, like, hey, are we going to let you keep going? Like, are we going to watch your levels, like watch your blood pressure, see if we can get it down, and then hopefully let you go home and make it to 34 weeks. Like, that was the ideal situation. I do have to say, like, there was points where I was like, let's just go ahead and have these babies. But I remember I had like friends and family members. I had a friend who had multiples. She was reaching out to me, kind of helping me. We were at Erlanger, so I had people who knew nurses there, like calling, like trying to get me the best nurses. So it was just a wonderful situation. And I knew that this was where I was going to have the baby. So it was kind of like a good test run. But anyways, like I said, we had to do a urine analysis. And the funniest part was that we're about to leave. I've got like my urine bucket that you have to like keep on ice. You have to fill it up with pee, like it's nasty, but you have to do this whole thing. And they come in again and they're like, okay, we're going to take this. Like, you're going to get to go home. Like, you just have to rest. You have to keep that blood pressure down, keep taking it, start your blood pressure medicine. You know, I was going to be going to the doctor like the next day. It was going to like start my stint of like going to the doctor like pretty much every other day until I had the babies. They're like, you're not going past 34 weeks. So we knew at that point, like, I'm having a C-section at 33 and 6 if I can make it that long. So I'm literally like on the final countdown. And they take my pee, they come back, they're bringing my papers, and the nurse like comes in and she's just like pale. And she's like, I am so sorry to tell you this. And I'm like, what? Like, are y'all not going to let me go? And she's like, no. She's like, one of the other nurses was carrying your urine down to the lab and spilt it, like dropped it and spilt it everywhere. And I'm like, I mean, like, I'm devastated because I'm like, I just did that whole urine analysis and I know I'm going to have to do it again. But I'm more devastated for this poor nurse who's probably covered in my urine. Like, that's awful. And the poor person who had to clean this up. And I'm just like, I just start laughing, like, not like at her or really like, but just because I'm like, I'm going to laugh because otherwise I'm going to cry and I've got to make light of this situation. So we had to get another one. I had to go home, do the whole process over again, take it to my doctor. And it did end up showing like, hey, like, you are preeclamptic at this point. And so I had to just, I didn't realize that there's like different levels of preeclampsia. So I guess mine at that point was not as concerning as it could be, but I still was very concerned because I had friends and people I knew who had HELLP syndrome, and that scared me, you know, and then of course having multiples and the impact that high blood pressure can have on them. So anyways, that kind of gets us up to the point of like my pregnancy, and, you know, kind of the blessing of how I was so blessed with that. So with our next episode, I want to talk about the delivery, the NICU, and then I'm going to go into the items that I would recommend to any mom who's having multiples. And I'll specifically talk about some items for triplet moms, but kind of some items to know, some things that I wish I had known, like for my delivery or for the NICU. If you are a mom who's expecting, my biggest thing to you is document your pregnancy. I wish I'd taken a few more videos. I didn't do maternity photos with either pregnancy because with the triplets, it just really quickly I realized like, hey, I'm at the point where it's now too late, and I wish I had done that. But take the pictures, record it. That way you can remember all these special moments. And but that's going to be our next episode. I appreciate you so much for listening in today. Like I said, we're still trying to kind of get all the things launched with this. We're getting an email Instagram, website. I'm going to post these to YouTube and Facebook. They'll eventually be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So pretty much anywhere that you can watch listen to a podcast. So to help us out, share this episode. Share it with your friends. Subscribe to us. Like I said, if you have questions, please go follow us on one of the social media pages. Ask us your questions. Once I get the email up and all the names, I will post those with this and share those. And then I'll have the links, like I said, in the show notes going. But I'm so excited about this and looking forward to our next few episodes. So until I see you again, I hope that you are surviving the multiple life if you are a multiple mom. And if not, thanks for listening and thanks for following us on this journey. I'm looking forward to continuing it with you. Bye, guys.